For millions of people, video games are just this source of incredible fun, amazing stories, and a way to connect. But for a lot of Christians, they're also a source of some pretty deep concern. So, are they just a harmless hobby, or could they be a spiritual trap? Let's dive in and really unpack this. So, that's the big question, right? Should Christians even be playing video games? And believe me, the answer is not simple. The Christian community is really divided on this, with some super strong, passionate feelings on both sides. So, what's at the heart of this whole debate? Well, it really boils down to two completely different ways of looking at them. On one side, you have people who see games as a major spiritual trap, an addictive time sink that could even open doors to some dark influences. But then on the other side, you've got folks who see them as a total blessing, a modern art form that brings rest, joy, and even community. Let's start by digging into those concerns first. Okay, so the first major worry is all about your time and your attention. It's this fear that games can become, well, all consuming, that they start competing for that central place in your life, what some people call the throne of your heart. And this goes right back to the very first commandment. The concern isn't that a PlayStation controller is literally a false god, but that anything, even a perfectly good hobby, can become an idol if it kicks God out of that number one spot in our lives. So, how do you know if a game has crossed that line for you? Well, Impact Video Ministries gives us a few really practical questions to ask ourselves. First, how many hours are you actually spending on it each week? Second, how much money have you sunk into it? Third, how much of your brain space does it take up, even when you're not playing? And finally, is gaming the only way you know how to rest and escape? That's a big one. This quote from Pastor Vlad Savchuk, man, it just hits the nail on the head. He argues that the real danger isn't always some big dramatic destruction, but a much more subtle distraction. The risk is that you could completely miss the destiny God has for you in the real world, all because you're so focused on beating the next level in a virtual one. All right, let's talk about the second major concern, the impact on your mind and your soul. This is where the conversation shifts a little bit from how much you play to what you're actually playing and how the content of that game can start to shape who you are. You see this word in the Bible, enticed. It literally means to be caught by bait. So picture a fish, right? It's in a safe spot, but then it sees something shiny and tempting, and it gets lured out, and bam, it's hooked. The worry is that some games can act just like that bait, waking up desires that pull us away from God. And according to Pastor Vlad Savchuk, this whole process, this influence, it often starts with something as simple as curiosity. You hear about some popular game, and maybe it has some occult themes, like witchcraft or sorcery, and you think, hey, I just want to see what all the fuss is about. But here's the thing about video games. They are so immersive. You're not just watching a movie. You are an active participant. You become the one casting the spells, the one summoning spirits, or doing whatever the virtual act is. So that initial curiosity, it just turned into participation. And this is where it gets really serious for some. The argument is that this participation can actually become an unintentional spiritual invitation. That by practicing virtual occultism over and over again, you might just be opening a spiritual door that you never, ever meant to touch. And beyond just the spiritual side of things, there are also some neurological concerns. Research that was highlighted by Hope Through Prophecy points to some pretty troubling effects of violent gaming. We're talking about reduced concentration, becoming less emotionally involved, and having a harder time controlling your impulses. But the most critical one, it can overstimulate and potentially damage the brain's frontal lobe, and that's the part of your brain that handles moral decision making. That's huge. Okay, but that is only one side of this debate. So let's pivot now. Let's turn the tables and look at the other perspective. Is it possible that video games, when we approach them with wisdom, can actually be a blessing? This verse from the book of James is absolutely key to the other side of this whole argument. It basically suggests that every good thing in our lives, creativity, art, stories, even just healthy fun, it all ultimately comes from God. And if that's true, couldn't video games be part of that? So the key word here is moderation. When games are kept in their proper place, they can be like a breath of fresh air. They can absolutely be a source of joy, a really healthy way to rest and decompress after a long day, and even an incredibly powerful tool for building friendships and community. And hey, we're not just talking about secular games either. There is this growing movement of Christian developers who are creating games with specifically faith based themes. I mean, think about it exploring ancient Israel in a game called Gate Zero, or commanding biblical heroes like Samson and Deborah in Judges TD. People are actually creating alternatives that are designed to be both fun and spiritually enriching. But there's a third path here, one that goes beyond just blessing or trap, and that path is sacrifice. One creator shared this amazing story about how he gave up gaming for a season, not because he thought it was evil, but because he wanted to pour all of that time and focus into his ministry instead. And the result? Just massive growth. It's such a powerful reminder that sometimes the right call is to give up something good to make room for something even better. So, with all these competing views, how in the world do you figure out what's right for you? Let's build a practical framework for that, for personal discernment. This isn't about me giving you some universal rule. It's about building a personal toolkit for your own journey with this. Here are 4 tests you can pretty much apply to any game. First, the test of content. Does this game glorify things that go against what the Bible teaches? Second, the test of conscience. How do you feel after you play? Are you refreshed or do you feel kind of guilty or convicted? Third, the test of control. Let's be honest. Is this an addiction? Is it pulling you away from God and your real life responsibilities? And finally, the test of community. Is gaming isolating you, or is it actually a tool you use for connection? At the end of the day, this whole entire debate really just boils down to one powerful question. It's not just about the games you play, but about the place they hold in your life. And it forces every single one of us to ask, in this constant battle for our time and our attention, what or maybe who is truly sitting on the throne?